Welcome to the Influencer Networking Secrets Podcast. This is the source for you to hear powerful stories, learn timeless principles, and take actionable steps to build magnetic influence, meaningful connection, and profitable publicity. By listening to our interviews with the world's most successful executives, thought leaders, and influencers, you'll learn how to be a magnet instead of a pusher, how to market yourself through pro bono publicity, why not-for-profit is for profit, how you can network with dream connections, why you should learn to be persuasive in print, and how to be a curator of yourself, your network, and your outcomes. Sign up at our mailing list to get your free advanced copy of the book, Influencer Networking Secrets, by going to thepaulesedwards.com/influencer networking secrets today. Now, please welcome your host, international best-selling author and executive ghostwriter, Paul Edwards.
Welcome to another episode of Influencer Networking Secrets, where you learn to build the magnetic influence, meaningful connection, and profitable publicity of a radically generous entrepreneur. My name is Paul Edwards, ghostwriter, CEO, best-selling author, husband, and father. And in today's episode, we feature Aurora Winter, best-selling author, TV producer, media coach, fellow ghostwriter, and serial entrepreneur. Aurora uses filmmaking expertise in neuroscience to help people communicate and get results, whether it's raising 7 figures for a startup, negotiating for a raise, or enrolling a new client. Her newest book is called Your $1 Million Message, the blueprint to launch your business brand and book. And today we're going to talk about how the world's most successful celebrities manage to write 8,000 words per hour for their $1 million message. In this episode, you'll hear a fresh take on some things you already know if you listen to me. Who are some of the most prolific celebrities out there without lifting a finger to write a single word? What a book does for you that most other media can't do. Why every expert, entrepreneur, and leader needs a book, not just because all the others didn't have one. And how long it really takes to write a book. It's a lot less time than you think. Don't forget to check the show notes for links to Aurora's books, website, and social media handles. Hold on to your seats. In the time it takes you to listen to this episode, somebody out there is busy writing 8,000 words on their way to earning $1 million. Why shouldn't it be you? Let's get started with Aurora Winter. We haven't yet developed a proper ghostwriter secret handshake, and not that you can really see it on a podcast anyway, but it's my pleasure to welcome Aurora Winter to the Influencer Networking Secrets podcast, a fellow ghostwriter, an expert with a background in technology and showbiz. And that should bring a unique verve if you decide to hire her to write one of your books. But Aurora, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Paul, it's great to be on the call with you, and congratulations on your new book. Influencer and Networking Secrets is awesome. Everybody should go out and buy it right now or get the free copy on your website.
I'm much obliged. I've been telling the people listening that for some time now, and some of them have responded. And to the rest of you who haven't, I say, why haven't you? It's
Exactly.
about time. But we're here to talk not today about me, but about Aurora's new book. You've got a new one as well, just coming out, and a relatively new one, Your $1 Million Message, the blueprint to launch your business brand and book. That's the newest one. So that's big on the docket for you. So what's going well, aside from the book, what's going well for you lately, Aurora?
Well, just really taking advantage of the coronavirus to lean into what really matters to me. You know, I had to pivot, as so many people did, after the coronavirus pandemic hit. I had my last event February 2020 in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, and it was so much fun, and I was so looking forward to the rest of the events I had scheduled for 2020 and 2021, but that had to get canceled. But the benefit of it is I double leaned into helping people with their books, which I love. And also, you know, I had a chance to go, well, what really matters to me? And I reconnected with my family in British Columbia, and I'm making more time for friends. So I don't know what changed with you, but I think there is some value in going, you know what? It's not all about making money. There's a lot more to life than that.
It was, looking back at it now, obviously there are inconveniences associated with it, but by and large, if it was meant to hurt me or cause me harm, it ended up having the opposite effect. The 2020 was one of the best years of my life, and
Awesome.
for many of the same reasons you described there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that as a in North America, I won't speak for the rest of the world. We needed a wake up call to go like, "Hello, are you really living, the life of meaning and purpose that you want?" And that's one of the things that I love about helping people with their books. I'm curious if you find the same thing. Most people think the benefit of writing a book is to have the book, but my
Yes.
background's as a coach, and so I find that there's so much value for people to discover the gold in their own personal story and to look at some of the worst incidents in their life and go, you know what? That changed me in ways that I really appreciate and value now. I hadn't really thought about that, but I'm going to stop hiding that story from the world and I'm going to share it, be authentic, be real. And business moves at the speed of trust. So when we are allowed to be real, when we give ourselves permission to be real, a lot of good can come out of that.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I would add um, that one of the worst things you can attempt to do, I think, in this day and age, with the what's available to you, is attempt to write your book by yourself.
Hmm.
Uh, for if for no other reason than the fact that creativity requires more than one human being. True creativity, because you have to meld the differences to get the unique that comes out of it. And so I always tell clients, you can write your book by yourself, um, but I'm going to bring to it angles you haven't thought of, and I'm going to see things and phrase things in a way you wouldn't think to phrase them. And from that, you're going to have a much more enriching story to tell.
Exactly. I think a lot of people get confused and they believe in order for it to be their book, that they have to actually be the one, on the keyboard typing every single word. But there's a difference between people like you and I who are word wranglers, who've spent, more than 10,000 hours and more than a decade, loving words, caring about story structure, understanding deeply what makes a book a page turner and what makes it a dud. And
Yes.
that's what we bring to the table. Whereas the person whose book it is, they bring their thoughts, their ideas, their expertise, their life experience. It is their book, but most people make the mistake of thinking that they have to also be, the word wrangler. And
Yes.
you and I can both bust that myth. In fact, there's so many books that are written by ghostwriters. People just don't know it. They don't realize it. I
Yeah.
mean, Hillary Clinton, I'm sure, doesn't write her books. I mean, she acknowledges a whole bunch of people in the acknowledgement section. She doesn't put their name on the cover.
Yep.
Senator John McCain did. David Goggins' book was ghost written. Gary Vee admits his book was ghost written. So a
Yep.
lot of people, because they don't know that ghostwriters or other people are involved in the team, they shoot themselves in the foot thinking that they need to do everything by themselves. And therefore, they end up staring at that blank page forever. And their book never sees the light of day, which is a great loss.
And we're going to touch on that because, of course, one of the points you make is that the top celebrities out there, top most influential people, write 8,000 words per minute, and of course, that's a figure of speech to illustrate a point that actually physically is most likely not taking place. Right? That celebrity has no room in their schedule to write 8 words in an hour, never mind 8,000.
Well, I get that. The process that I use with my clients, I'm curious to learn more about the process that you use. But I use my trademark process is called spoken author. I'm working on a book by that title, but that book's not available yet. And so after creating the story structure with my client, I actually interview them on a podcast like this. And so that we're creating multiple streams of value simultaneously. We're capturing the messy first draft by transcribing that. And then we also have the audio and the video to slice and dice and make a whole bunch of content just before their book launches. So my clients who do this typically do create about 8,000 words per hour. In fact, I have one client who's super smart. He's a senior partner of a law firm, and we had a 2-hour interview, and he recorded or re-recorded together 21,500 words. So 8,000 words an hour is in fact what you can create if you already have the story structure and if you have the right person interviewing you who's asking you the right questions. And I'm certainly not the first person to think of this. This is how Winston Churchill wrote his books. This is how Dame Cartland, who was a best-selling romance author, wrote her books. She would dictate them aloud to her editors or her secretaries, and then they would those people, the word wranglers, would go off
Yep.
and turn them into a manuscript. What about you? How do you
Exactly.
tend to create books? Do you use something similar to that, or a different process?
Mm, not much different. Yeah. In fact, we're going to come to a question about this, but I think if you have the right relationship with a highly proactive client and you have all your processes dialed in, I think you can literally do it in a 1 8 hour block
Yeah.
if you really want to.
Hmm.
Um, and I know a few people in the business who are already doing that. And but we'll come to that in a bit. I want to get back before I get too far off track and ask you about what's the biggest challenge or hardest part of being you right now.
The biggest challenge for me is I'm kind of a gym rat. And I used to love going to yoga classes, like hot yoga classes, and I would go to boxing classes and just really, take it up a notch with the loud music and the Zumba. And now I'm exercising by myself, to YouTube videos, which is okay, but it's not my ideal. How about you?
You prefer a group to participate with there when you do
I
it?
do, yeah. Especially miss the kickboxing classes that I was taking in Mountain View, California. I was getting really in good shape, and I got all
Yep.
my aggravations out. Punch.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm not. Well, I've been very fortunate. My gym has stayed open, and my coach owns the gym where I work out, and so at the time of recording, we were actually working on a cutting phase. I've competed in a couple of bodybuilding shows, and that's my hobby in
Ah,
my spare time. And so yes, I'm not missing that. Hard part for me is just the gradual but sometimes very rapid as well uh, transition from solopreneur into agency CEO, where you're still doing some of the billable work. You're definitely providing the editorial oversight, but you're having to keep peeling yourself out of the equation. And
ah,
sometimes I get that right away, but a lot of times I it doesn't occur to me to pull myself out of it. It does. I keep thinking I'm the only person who can do this, and I'm not.
right.
So adventures in business. What are you looking forward to, Aurora? What's coming in the next few weeks or months that you're excited about?
Well, I'm excited about launching your $1 million message. May 5th comes out. It's on pre-sale on Amazon right now. So that's fun. It's the first time I've really paid any attention to doing a book launch on Amazon. I used to really not care about Amazon or online book sales because perhaps like you, I was more interested in my own community and offering the book for free. People would pay for shipping and handling. Maybe I was arrogant because I think I was arrogant. Okay, I confess arrogance. Because actually, it's really fun for me to lean into learning about advertising on Amazon. I've had a couple of clients. I've managed to get them, award-winning books and #1 bestsellers, and learning about all the different things that you can do. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that Amazon is the #3 search engine. So while Google is great and YouTube is the #2 search engine, Amazon is the #3 search engine. So as we both serve leaders to get their thoughts captured in a form of a book, then they can take advantage of that. I mean, your book's available on Amazon. People can find you around the world. They can find you on Amazon,
Yeah, yeah,
various
absolutely.
locations. Yeah.
It's definitely a powerful engine and a force to be reckoned with. And
And the main
I
thing,
don't.
sorry, I got to rant for just a second. Other social media platforms, not mentioning any, Facebook, you can build your platform and in a moment they can just take it away without even explaining what it was that you did wrong, something they didn't like about how you were handling it, how you were communicating. And I've had so many friends, they had, you know, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of followers, and in a moment, gone because something
Yeah,
you said wasn't okay. Whereas once you have a published book, nobody can say, that line on page 27, we're going to cut off your Amazon account and you won't be able to sell that book or share what you really believe in. So that's a big power.
yes,
I think that we're all wise to have our own website, have our own email list, and have a book, because that can be your number one legacy asset or your number one marketing asset, positioning you. And the social media giants can't take it away.
That's true. And as I was, that reminded me of my old mentor, Rob Kosberg, who you may know, bestseller publishing in Los Angeles, does a similar thing. And we had an interesting interview exchange about that one time because of the legacy familial sort of thing, angle of writing a book,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that is that I have no idea what my great 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 grandfather thought about or witnessed or
Yeah.
anything like that in his day.
Mm-hmm.
I have some idea of what my dad did because my dad was a writer like me, so he wrote a very extensive autobiography.
Mm.
But you go back just one generation behind that. My grandfather on my dad's side, I don't know much about him. I know just bits and pieces of what my dad tells me. But my great grandchildren, they're going to have a podcast they can check out, several books they can check out, blogs, in just all this content, all this stuff that I've written. They're going to have, plus all my journaling and all that, they're going to have gobs of content to find out what I thought, how I behaved, how I believed, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, because we're all mortal. And in a way, your book or your books, they're going to definitely outlive you. They may perhaps even be immortal if we want to lean into that. I mean, my mother passed away January 13th, 2016, just after I got my MBA. And I had the foresight to interview her a number of times before she died. So I've got audio recordings that I intend to turn into a book. And she told stories about her parents and her grandparents. And while I'd heard those stories many times before, the details slip away if you don't have them captured in some fixed form. So
Yes.
while I am certainly devastated that she passed, it was, divine right timing. And the two things I'm really grateful for is I was there when she passed over. So I was there when she took her last breath, just as she was with me when I took my first breath. And then the second thing that was precious is I've got the audio recordings from all of her stories of how growing up on the farm as a child, and I have those forever. I've already shared the audios with her family, and I can turn that into a book.
Mm.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for what that's worth, right? Whether it's to your descendants or, in many cases, I'm reading books by people that I have absolutely no relation to,
Mm-hmm.
but who nevertheless spiritually I connect with, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that, they thought back then like I think today. It wasn't all that different. I think my history classes always made it seem like it was, but actually it wasn't. I can actually find a lot of people thinking the same thing
Yeah.
thousands of years ago that I'm thinking today.
Yeah. It's great to know where we come from.
Yeah.
Keeps us humble, but also it's inspiring. Yeah. To know where we come from.
For sure. Yeah.
And there's interesting coincidences. Like I became a writer. I'd love to hear your story, what prompted you, but I became a writer. I know the exact moment. So I was 9 years old. I reached up in the school library. I had to be on my tippy toes to reach the last book in C.S. Lewis's Narnia series. And as I reached down that last book, I had this mixture of intense emotions of anticipatory delight because I would get to read this book, and anticipatory grief because it was the last book in the Narnia series. And in that moment, I just realized how amazing it was to transport somebody else to another place and time and make that real for me with just little black dots on white paper. And I decided in that moment as a 9-year-old that I would do whatever I could to follow in C.S. Lewis's footsteps and become as great a writer as I could possibly be. And here's the really shocking thing, I think. I feel like there's divine hand in it. many, many years later, when my husband died suddenly at the age of 33, the book that consoled me the most was by the same man, by C.S. Lewis. His Diary of Healing, titled A Grief Observed, was really helpful to me because I didn't want to read, 7 steps to overcoming grief. I wanted to go
Yeah.
is this normal, or should I just shoot myself now and get this over with? And
Yes.
and so it's interesting how somebody who I never met mentored me twice.
Yes. Yep. Yep. For sure.
Yeah.
I have a lot of that from him, from Dallas Willard. I get a lot of wisdom from
Yeah.
him. So many authors we could go into. I mean, it's and then of course there are ones that I'm not related to, but I do get to meet. Right.
Yeah.
John Eldridge was on this show.
Mhm.
That guy has had a seismic effect on my life.
Wow.
Totally reoriented my faith and my journey and all that, and privileged to speak to him. And it was right before the pandemic hit, and he had just put out a new book called Get Your Life Back. And
Good time.
by that time, I was so steeped in that culture that I was already doing most of the stuff that he was talking about. But I took it to my mastermind group, and they found it really, really helpful. So, well, I wanted to ask you this, Aurora. We talked about how celebrities write 8,000 words per hour,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, I read that, and I'm like, I think I know what she means there. And I believe, and I've certainly have experienced, that entrepreneurs and business leaders can do the same thing. I was going to ask you, and we've sort of already answered this. Who do you, maybe some people you've worked with who you're free to speak about, or who could you point to that most people would know, right? We mentioned some names, Hillary Clinton, et cetera, who do this. And, what's the unique strength that comes from writing a book that maybe you can't get with other forms of expression, like a blog or a publication or something like that? What's the unique strength of a book when you do this?
Okay, there's a couple of really good questions in there. So I'll answer, who do people know or probably know who have taken advantage of the spoken author method or something similar to that, where they get interviewed by somebody like myself or somebody like you, Paul. So I think besides Hillary Clinton and I would imagine almost all of the political greats, but also celebrities like Goldie Hawn. Most recently, I think many people know of David Goggins. His book is called Can't Hurt Me. It was actually written by a ghostwriter and a journalist, Adam. I'm going to botch the pronunciation of his last name, so I'll just leave it at that. And David Goggins is dyslexic. So is Richard Branson. Yes. Richard Branson is dyslexic, and he's written shelves full of books. So I'm pretty darn certain that he is not writing them, because writing is really hard for him. But thinking is not. He's a brilliant thinker. Back to David Goggins.
Yes.
So the worst advice, David Goggins was asked on a podcast, what was the worst advice he ever got? And he said the worst advice he ever got was from an agent in New York who told him if he self-published his book, he would only sell at most 5,000 copies, and he should definitely go with one of the big publishers. And Goggins decided not to, not so much because he thought he would sell a boatload of copies, but because he didn't want to lose control of his own story. So he decided to self-publish, and he hired and worked with a ghostwriter. And the end result was he sold over 1 million copies of his book and 600,000 copies of his audiobook. So if he had followed the traditional advice, it probably would have cost him upwards of $20 million. So it is possible, if you are willing to promote your book, to do great things with it. And the main thing is you control your story. You haven't given your voice away. And if you are a leader or an entrepreneur, maintaining control of your voice is very important, and maintain control of that lead magnet for your business. So David Goggins would be an example, I think, that most people would know. And then the second question you asked, if I remember correctly, was what's unique about a book? Why not a podcast or an audio or something else? I think the thing that is so unique about a book is that it's like telepathy that can time travel. So a book is like a seed. It's amazingly able to travel, thousands of miles and decades, dozens of decades, hundreds of years. And when that person opens it years later, they can read, the words, and they
Yes.
can experience being coached or mentored or connected to the author. And that's amazing. That's astonishing. Whereas podcasts are great for the sense of, you get a sense of, Paul's energy and my energy, but it's probably not going to last as long as the Bible or the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right?
Yes.
So I think it's not either or, it's both. And a book tends to
Yeah.
be much more thought through and polished than a podcast. I would say a podcast is like a messy first draft. So if you have something to say, and if you don't think you have something to say, then that's probably because somebody injured you as a child and said, you can't write. Everybody has something to say who would be listening to this podcast. Do yourself a favor and consider, working with Paul or working with me or working with somebody else, and get your message out before it's too late. Because once you're on the other side of the veil, you won't be writing any books.
Yes. Yes. It's my I tend to say the same thing. I'm like, you should do a podcast
Mm-hmm.
if you're strong there. You should do a YouTube channel if you're strong there. You should do a blog or whatever. But be advised that not everybody's going to interact with you that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now there are people like, they are just much stronger in the visual format.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, concentrate a majority of your time there. No question, like I do in the written format, because that's where I'm strong. But don't limit it to that. And the higher you go, the more authority you gather, the more authority you're able to project. And a book does that in a way that I think other forms of media don't.
Yeah.
Because they are an actual physical representation of a huge investment of brain power. Not that you like, okay, we're ghostwriters, so our clients don't do most of the writing. No, of course they don't, but they do, but they have all this accumulated wisdom
Yeah.
that they've had to sit down and get out of themselves and then organize it and message it correctly so that it speaks to that target audience.
Exactly. Well,
And it's,
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, the nice thing here's like a physical book. Like,
Right.
if you're having a meeting with somebody and you bring them a book and you autograph it and give it to them, it doesn't require them opening up their computer and going to YouTube or, somehow doing some interrupting activity. You just give them a physical thing. It's got a thud factor, funk. You autograph it, it's personal, and then they can take it and read it at their convenience. And even if they never open the book, the fact that you have one creates a halo of authority. Anybody can write a book, but so few people actually take the time. So it's like
Yes.
having an
Yes.
MBA or having a PhD. It speaks to your level of expertise and your commitment to that expertise.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What would you add to
Yes.
that?
Yeah. That's sort of that's what I was thinking about. There was like, we have so many people out there who these days are out there saying, well, I'm this and I'm that. And the joke that I shared with some people recently was, and a lot of people out there who are saying they know the secrets of billionaires, but they themselves are not billionaires.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, something doesn't sit right about that, because most billionaires don't get on social media talking to the average person about how I'm going to share my billionaire secrets,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's not an authenticity, but maybe just a thoroughness gap there. But a book,
The disconnect. Mm-hmm.
yeah, a book says the opposite. A book says, I've been here, I've done this. I have experience. I have a story. I have knowledge. I have wisdom. And now you can have it too.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to go to the lengths of writing it and editing it and getting all the cover design and the printing and the filing and all that kind of stuff that goes into it. Right?
Yeah, I was just dealing with the proofreader on your $1 million message. It's like, commas.
Yeah.
You probably just went through that recently with
Oh, they're
influencing
ruthless.
networking secrets. It's like, no, I don't want to deal with commas any longer.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. So, and I think, the worst way to make money with a book, which you and I both know, but for the benefits of the listeners who haven't been listening to you closely enough, the worst way is by selling books. So your $1 million message, blueprint for your business brand and book, actually talks about seven different models, and gives examples of how people can make seven figures with a book. And none of those ways are by selling books.
Yes.
Even New York Times bestselling authors who are super famous, like Wayne Dyer, made 85% of their income not from books, from other things, from
Yes.
consulting, from speaking, from selling, at the back of the room. And so I have many clients who were raising capital when they first started working with me, getting clear on their message, getting clear on their sound bites, getting clear on what they really care about and the value that they provide. And all of them raised seven figures. Not all of them finished their book because they were too busy running, what became an 8-figure business and a team of, instead of a dozen people, 400 people. For example, Jason Henneberry, one of the clients that I worked with, but all of them raised seven figures. And all of those clients actually came to me when they had raised nothing. So that's really the value of a message. And in fact, one point I'd really love for people who are not thinking about writing a book, it's not only about a book, it's about dedicating some time to practicing and polishing your message, distilling your message. I mean, Steve Jobs spent 3 weeks practicing for those Apple launches. If somebody that busy can choose wisely to spend 3 weeks practicing, perhaps others would also benefit. So one of the books that I read, it's called Significant Objects. And this was an amazing book. I don't know if you've read it, but I think a lot of people think that in order to double their revenue, they need to double their ad spend. But in fact, to double your revenue, you need to double down on your message, on your story.
Yeah.
And so this book was very interesting because they they put 100 different objects on eBay with a story or without a story. And the stories were not written by the same people. They chose from professional writers like you and me, amateur writers. Some of the stories were even negative.
Yeah.
But the overall impact of the same items, the same 100 different items with a story or without a story. Do you want to guess how much the story increased the value?
Night and day.
Night and day. Do you want to guess at a number?
Oh, I couldn't even begin. I'd like to hear.
Yeah, you're going to probably get this book and use this soundbite. 27-fold increase in value.
Yeah.
The objects were exactly the same. They were unchanged. But story added significance, added meaning, added emotion to what otherwise was just an object. So that's the value of your story, even if it's not in a book. But once you've got it that clear, might as well put it in some fixed form.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't thinking of going this direction with it, Aurora, but who I mentioned earlier, John Eldridge, pointed this out. He said, whenever you get together with a friend or family or something, what's the first thing you do? You start telling stories.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, man, you're not going to believe what happened. My car broke down. We think that's just details. No, it's stories. We're telling each other stories. We're telling each other what's happened lately. That's why I start off all of my episodes. What's the story? What's going well? What's not going so well? What are you looking forward to? I'm getting people to tell their stories, right? It's a habit that you have to get into, because on the influence building side, you want to build connection and influence people, get them telling their story.
Exactly
because
right.
nobody asked them that,
Yeah.
right?
And I'm really passionate about stories because I think, science has done a lot of good for our world and has created a lot of value. But stories predate science by a long time. And
Oh yeah,
stories really contain the DNA of wisdom of our ancestors. I mean, the stories that Jesus shared are still with us 2,000 years later, and they contain a DNA of wisdom that we can interpret today and ponder today and apply in our lives today. So stories do create connection, but they also can carry forward this DNA of wisdom so that your great, great, great grandchildren can learn more about you, for example.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Dallas Willard put that so well. He said that if you dissect a cat in a biology lab, it'll tell you what the cat's entrails and organs and bone structure and all that look like. It'll say nothing about the sly, playful creature that wants to be let out as soon as you let it in, right? And chases the laser pointer around on the floor.
Yeah.
Tell you nothing about that.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, how much more with a human being, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, excellent point. Here's another one. Some people might, this is particularly true in the world of politics. Some people might think they nowadays, I need a book because everyone else has got a book. Now, first of all, we know that's not true, but it's sort of getting to a sufficient mainstream point now with a lot of people, especially if you're in the influence space, you're in the thought leader space. Why would you say it's that's we all know why that's not a good enough reason, but what would you say that there's more to this than simply keeping up with the crowd, right? And I know we've already covered this to some extent, but I want to attack it from this angle as well.
Oh, I really like that question. If you're doing it to keep up with the crowd, I would not be the person to reach out to.
Yeah,
Your story matters, but only if it's your story. And when I work with my clients, we go deep. We don't just do the superficial, what are your 5 points to whatever. That's not
right.
interesting to me. And sometimes it's, there's some resistance looking at the deaths, looking at the divorces, looking at the illness, looking at those stillborn hopes and dreams, looking at the business that failed. But when people are willing to sift through that mud, there's always gold and silver and maybe some diamonds. And
Yes.
as a result, the book will be deep because it will be their stories and their hard-won wisdom. I don't think a good reason for doing anything is because everybody else is doing it. I hope that
Yeah.
the pandemic has woken people up from that absurd mission of the bigger house, the bigger car, the bigger bragging rights.
Mm,
If you feel like you want to leave a legacy and you have something to say, that's a great reason to write a book. If you keep saying the same stories over and over and over, why not save yourself the breath and put it in a book? You can send to people before you meet with them.
yeah.
I don't know if I'm answering your question accurately. What would you say to this comment?
Yeah, it's a similar thing, and even more to the point. Most people, it's not true that most people um, have a book,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even as much as a lot more people today have them than yesterday. Yes, because self-publishing has become a lot easier. But as you said, do they have them for the right reasons? Because if you don't, right, it's to me, it's like you might as well not even have one.
Mm.
If your book is a bunch of navel gazing, right? The idea of the book to me is impacting other people.
Yeah.
A message is no good if the only person who reads it as the transmitter. Right? That's like getting on the radio and nobody's listening.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, so.
Well, we're talking the same language. I mean, that's my number one, communication hack. If people want like just a quick communication hack, think about the value to the person who's receiving your message. Stop thinking about navel gazing or stop thinking about what you want to say. If you communicate in a way that you believe will add value to the listener or the reader, you're definitely on the right track.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is like, people are shocked, right? To make that discovery.
I know, it's weird, huh?
I was shocked when I made it. I was like, what? People don't want to hear me talk just because I like the sound of my own voice? No, apparently not.
Well, you do have a nice sounding voice. Got a radio voice, nice and mellow.
I do have the radio voice, but I'm surprised, not anymore. I've been surprised many times how people are far more interested in how I say what I say than what I actually say. And I'm sitting there hoping they catch the substance of what I say.
Right.
Right. And, and they don't. They're like, they comment about how they love my voice. And I'm like, thank you. But did you get what I said?
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what I'm thinking in the back of my head. So,
but I would add to that, there's an energy signature in waveforms, whether the waveform is audio or video, or even the waveform captured in the thoughts of a book. So while you do have a lovely, rich voice, musical voice, there's also a signature of peace, of confidence, of servant leadership. That's what I hear. I hear who you are.
I'm honored. That's certainly what I'm aiming for. Because God knows I've directed it in some places I had no business going. So at the top, we talked about this. This is the last one that I have in my list of questions. We were talking about the ability that with all the tools we have at our disposal today, to actually extract a book from somebody in a single 8-hour setting, if they're willing to go the distance on that. And if you can't do it in a single 8-hour setting, you can do it 1 hour a week for 8 weeks, and that's not a huge time consumption of your time. But I'm just kind of curious. This is another shop talking thing here, Aurora. What does it usually work out to for you? I usually find my clients like to do an hour a week, or maybe 2 hours, blocks of 2 hours, but that's about as far as they can go. So, let's cast a range here so people don't feel like, oh my gosh, I got to sit and do 8 hours of interviews in a row, and that's the only way I'm going to get it done. Yeah.
Well, I've done it both ways. So shop talking. So before the coronavirus pandemic, shut things down, I interviewed my clients who are dentists. I went to San Diego to interview them. And it was 1 day of interview. Well, a day and a half, if you want to count that we had, dinner the day before. But they were prepared. I had already, they had online videos and audios. They understood story structure. They understood what I was looking for. And in a day, I recorded what became their book, Keys to a Healthy Smile After 40, 7 Secrets to Feeling 7 Years Younger. But the most important part of that book was not rushing to start it, but first, I have an MBA, I'm a serial entrepreneur, I've launched multiple businesses. First was me saying, okay, so who is your most valuable client, patient? And they explained to me, the average 20-year-old comes in for the usual free exam offer and spends $100 or $200. But somebody who's in their 40s, 50s, or 60s could come in and spend $10,000, $20,000, $5,000. So understanding that, we positioned them as the go-to experts for people over 40. And that increased their revenue from $1.5 million to $6 million. So getting clear on their message, writing the book, getting positioned as the go-to experts in San Diego for people over 40, because the title of the book is Keys to a Healthy Smile Over 40. changed the nature of their business from the typical dentist to a much more lucrative patient that they were experts at serving. I wouldn't have done the book otherwise. And it also has this really cool story about them coming to America from Vietnam. So that was really interesting. So I've done that, the 8-hour full day, lean into it. But most of my clients are quite busy running their businesses. Most of my clients are already earning, high or mid six figures as a doctor, a lawyer, an expert of some kind, or they're running a 7-figure business. So typically we talk for an hour each week, and
Yes.
we will start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey would say. So firstly, we
Yep.
strategically look at what's the back end, what's the ideal business outcome from the book, and then with that end in mind, design a book that will achieve those goals. And then after
Yeah.
that is done, and I understand who they are and what's really unique and special about them, which they're often blind to. People don't get how
Mm-hmm.
amazing they are. So once I see what's so unique and cool about them and the way that they serve, then I interview them. And it's usually about an hour a week, but sometimes it's 2 hours if they're on a roll. Usually people peter out after that period of time, and it's more fun for them to do it again in another week. That's what I do.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you typically find?
Yeah, I could I could do the 8-hour marathon if that, if you're working with somebody who just like, I got one day,
Yeah.
that's it, take it or leave it, and you'd be like, okay, well then I will build that process out meticulously, follow it to the T, and 8 hours later we will have everything we need, and we'll disappear for 90 days, and 3 months later you come back and you'll have a book.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's how busy you are, then that's how simple we'll make it. But yeah, I would say most of the time, um, most of the people that I've worked with, um, they have an hour a week. Um, Sometimes they might be like, well, I could do 1 4-hour session each month kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, well, that'll work.
Mm-hmm.
2 months, we'll just do 4 months this month and 4 months next month. And we'll get the drafts of the first half of the book written and, you know, do the other half of it once we've had the second interview. But yeah, for the most part, same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a one day with Dr. Jennifer Herrera. She founded 4 charter schools, but she wanted to expand her message, and she had 100% success ratio in getting kids into college. And she was primarily dealing with kids from families who had not been to college. And so she was very determined and excited to get that message out. So her book's called Making College Come True. And we did that as a one-day interview in San Francisco. But she was also prepared. So she had videos and audios and training in advance. And every now and again, she'd go off on a tangent. I'm like, time out. You remember we did this, your signature story structure. Can you give it to me this way? I coach her a little bit, and then she'd give it to me that way. Of course, wonder of writing is you can always revise it later. But I wanted to have the audios and videos as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Same kind of thing. Like this is not for a book, but it's a content ghostwriting organic growth strategy we're doing right now for a client. And he has niched well and is serving that older 50 to 60 demographic.
Mm-hmm.
He himself is quite a bit younger, but what he knows can help people at that age. And so that gives us just a ton of ammunition for writing,
Yeah.
And at that point it becomes almost like a mix and match game, like, because you got all the research on one side,
Yeah.
and then you got your chops with words on the other, and you just say, okay, where do I put this paragraph because it answers this problem, and you put it in sequence, and it's all of a sudden writing becomes not so difficult to do.
Yeah. I love what I do. I love the combination of writing and people and service. And I love any kind of business model that can create something once and then provide it hundreds or thousands or millions of times, whether it's a video or a book. That's the leverage we can, take advantage of. So what's your favorite part of helping people with their books or their blog messages, or perhaps it's building your team? What's your favorite thing in your business these days, post-COVID?
I didn't, I said I would serve as the CEO of my agency until I had found and groomed a successor. I originally didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that I quite enjoy it.
Nice.
I'm not changing my mind necessarily, because I one day would like to do sort of more of like a chairman role and really give somebody younger than me an opportunity to exercise good leadership skill if I find the right person for that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do enjoy that part of it. And then there's this wonderful collaboration I have with so many of my clients, because I used to seek them on the basis of demographics,
Mm-hmm.
and I've found increasingly I can't do that.
Hmm.
I found that even if you are a thought leader, influencer, executive, somebody with a large audience, and you need content, that doesn't necessarily make you a fit for me.
Mm.
You have to give a rip about the same things that I do,
Mm.
and you have to look at other people the same way that I do. And so you'll either read my book and say, sounds like fun, I'm too busy," or you'll say, that is me spot on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I think about people. I walk into a room and everybody else is looking down at their phones, and I'm looking around at people trying to make eye contact,
Mm.
looking for connection,
Yeah. That's so
right?
super.
And meaningful connection, not just hi, how do you do, right? I want to have a meaningful, profound conversation with you. I want to swim in the depths.
Mm.
Maybe not on the first conversation, but get one level deeper than we were when we first shook hands and said hello.
Well, we're on the same page, and I'll go for the first conversation. Why not? Life is short. And
Yeah.
I think that's what makes a good writer too, somebody who wants to dig deeper. And I agree with you. I think that's another cool thing about books or videos or podcasts, I suppose, is they both attract and repel. Like, I'm not the best person to serve somebody who doesn't want to make a contribution. If they just want to make money, but they're not interested in making a contribution, and they see people as users rather than, God in disguise, then I wouldn't be the best person to serve them, because we are not
Yeah.
aligned. So I'm very picky about the clients that I work with. And as a consequence, because we're aligned, I can really make a difference.
Yeah, well, and that brings up a very good C.S. Lewis quote that I recently gave in one of my rare public speaking opportunities, and that was that I remembered that he said, "There are no mere mortals. You have never talked to an ordinary human being."
Mm.
And what I was trying to get people to realize is that most of us walk past or ignore or downplay the significance of hundreds of great opportunities every day. They're sitting right in front of us and we have no idea, because we're not curious enough to ask. And I've just made it a practice that, given the opportunity, I'm not going to do that. I am going to give a rip about what's important to that person,
Mm.
because I have cared too much about what I care about enough times to know that's not a long-term winning proposition. So,
Well, we're definitely aligned on that, Paul. I'd like to imagine that each person has a secret gift for me, but it's up to me to discover it, like the pearl in an oyster. But you said it beautifully, quoting C.S. Lewis. Absolutely. I absolutely love that. So once again, C.S. Lewis is appearing in my life with a great message. Yeah.
Yep, he's not going to go quiet anytime soon.
No, it's amazing how long people can absolutely last.
But as for you and me, we've got to get working on our own immortality, because time's running out here, and we've got lots of books left in us to write, at least on behalf of others, as well
Absolutely,
as
Paul.
perhaps our own.
So if I may just
Aurora,
if I may just share, if people want to get a free copy of my new book, Your $1 Million Message, they can follow me on Goodreads, Aurora Winter on Goodreads. I'm giving away 100 copies of the advanced review book on Goodreads, or they can always grab it on Amazon, Your $1 Million Message, or they can go to thoughtleaderlaunch.com and get some free video training. So a bunch of ways I can be of service to your listeners. Such a delight connecting with you, Paul. I feel like I've made a new friend. We've got a lot in common.
Yes. And that was the answer to my next question. And so with that, unless there's anything else for the good of the order, Aurora, it's been so nice having you on the show and would love to do it again sometime soon.
Likewise. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Influencer Networking Secrets. Don't forget to go to thepaulsedwards.com/influencer networking secrets to get signed up for your free copy of Influencer Networking Secrets, the book. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone you know who would benefit. See you next time. Welcome to the Influencer Networking Secrets Podcast. This is the source for you to hear powerful stories, learn timeless principles, and take actionable steps to build magnetic influence, meaningful connection, and profitable publicity. By listening to our interviews with the world's most successful executives, thought leaders, and influencers, you'll learn how to be a magnet instead of a pusher, how to market yourself through pro bono publicity, why not-for-profit is for profit, how you can network with dream connections, why you should learn to be persuasive in print, and how to be a curator of yourself, your network, and your outcomes. Sign up at our mailing list to get your free advanced copy of the book, Influencer Networking Secrets, by going to